The hallway was quieter than usual on this freezing morning. The snow outside fell slowly, almost out of respect for the climate inside the asylum. On the door of room 12, someone had left a small cake. Nothing fancy, just a white icing and a lovingly lit, crooked blue candle. But when a caregiver returned minutes later, the candle was out, and the cake was gone. No sound, no trace. Just the empty plate, carefully left in the same place. The scene was already known there. Every year someone tried to celebrate. A kind gesture, a shy memory, an attempt to break the ice around Jakob. But he made a point of erasing any sign of his own existence, and it wasn't a force of expression. He literally erased torn cards, forgotten notes, flowers returned to the garden. Nothing remained. In the north wing of the asylum, where the cold seemed to last longer and the sunlight entered more timidly, lived the man who chose to remain silent over time. Some said he was just reserved, others who carried a weight that no one had the courage to ask about. But everyone knew one thing. Their birthdays were a forbidden subject. The silence around him wasn't just his. It was a silence that the runners themselves respected. As if that room held something that couldn't be touched, an emptiness that time hadn't filled. And every year, like a dark ritual, someone would try to light a candle, and it, as always, would go out. It was as if, for Mr. Jakob, time had frozen at a point he never wanted to cross again. And this year, it would be no different. Or would it be? In the quietest wing of the asylum, where the fireplace never seemed to reach with its heat, lived Jakob, a man who not only avoided parties, but who seemed to have deleted every trace of himself in time. The hallway where he lived was one of the oldest in the house, with windows that creaked in the wind and a wall clock that had stopped telling the time a long time ago. The caregivers avoided that space after dark. Some out of respect, others out of a silent fear of touching something they didn't understand. Sofia had started that week, young, curious, with that sparkle in the eyes of someone who still believed that each elderly person carries a sleeping universe. She heard the whispers in the cafeteria, little warnings disguised as gossip. Don't insist on his birthday, just ignore it. But it was difficult for her to understand. How could anyone not want to be remembered? How could someone hide so much from their own history? The routine of the asylum, as repetitive as the white days outside, did not erase the growing restlessness that Sofia felt. She watched Jakob from afar, his steps always measured, his gaze lost somewhere between yesterday and never. He didn't talk to anyone. She always sat in the same chair, near the window, but never looked outside, as if the inside was already enough landscape to carry. It was there, among the collected trays and folded blankets, that Sofia decided not to follow the advice. Not out of stubbornness, but because something in that silence screamed more than any forgotten celebration. And because sometimes stories like this don't appear by chance. They choose when and with whom to awaken. If you feel that frozen memories deserve to be touched with care, subscribe to Frozen Chronicles now. Some stories just ask for someone to have the courage to listen. Sofia started slowly. A casual comment about the weather, an unassuming question about the day's newspaper, a discreet compliment to Jakob's quiet elegance, always so impeccable in his old sweaters, lined up as if he were still stuck in a military routine no one else followed. But every attempt hit the ice that surrounded that man. He didn't respond. Don't smile. Sometimes he just blinked slowly, as if acknowledging her presence, but without letting it touch him inside. On the first Friday of the month, Sofia discreetly left a cup of apple and cinnamon tea on the table next to her armchair. It was the favorite drink of many there, and she had noticed that he always watched when someone served it. When he returned, the cup was empty, But in the same place was a folded paper, handwritten, "Avoid this." No signature, no emotion, just the cold warning. Sofia kept it like someone keeping a road sign. You can continue, but there are risks. She started to notice other things. In the asylum's records, important dates were left blank in his file. No parties, no visits, no celebrations. Easter, Christmas, New Year. Nothing made him break out of his routine. The gifts that the volunteers distributed always ended up in the donation box the next day. The cards received were torn up as soon as they touched the table. For Jakob, any form of celebration was a threat, as if celebrating something would betray a silent pact with pain. Once, Sofia tried to show him an old photo she had found in the asylum's collection. A group of old residents sitting in the snow, laughing in front of a fire. "It was the winter of 1983, she said, with a gentle smile. Jakob glanced at him, closed his eyes, and stood up without saying anything. The gesture seemed small, but it said it all. It wasn't the image that bothered him. It was laughter, the heat, the moment of lightness he had left frozen at some point in history itself. The following week, she discreetly organized a movie session for the residents, an old French film with a soft soundtrack and poetic dialogues. Jakob appeared in the room, but remained standing, leaning against the door. When the first scene showed a child blowing out birthday candles, he simply turned his back and walked away. Sofia saw it, felt, and he understood. It wasn't just the birthday, it was the entire time that he refused to feel. There, among stuffy hallways and fogged windows, was a man who didn't just avoid the past. He avoided any cracks where the present could enter. For him, feeling was dangerous. Remember, lethal. And smiling. Perhaps it was the final betrayal of the pain that he kept alive, like someone keeping an invisible altar in his chest. Sofia began to walk more slowly through the corridors of the North Wing, not out of fear, but out of respect. I knew that some silences are not empty. They are full of everything that was never said. And that, sometimes, the key to unlocking a frozen story, begins with a gesture that doesn't try to force, but just remains. On an afternoon when the snow seemed to be falling more heavily outside, Sofia went to the nursing home's storage wing, looking for extra blankets for the residents. The place was almost forgotten. It smelled of damp wood. It held stacked boxes, aged papers, and a dust that seemed to hold more than just time. It held silences. As he rummaged through old books and faded folders, his fingers touched something heavier, with a leather texture and a rusty metal clasp, a photo album. It was old, simple, covered in a thin layer of dust. She opened it carefully. The first few pages were blank. Others had been ripped off abruptly, leaving irregular marks, as if someone had wanted to erase something in a hurry. Sofia felt her heart tighten. He turned over a few more pages until he found in the center a single photo folded in half. The paper was already worn out, but the image still survived. A boy, smiling with his eyes, wearing a thick blue wool coat. There was something in his gaze. It wasn't just innocence. It was hope. Below the image, in hesitant and restrained handwriting, it read, "Lucas, 8 years old." Sofia felt the air heavy. She held the photo like someone holding something that still pulses. Everything indicated that that album was Jakob's. But why had he hidden it there? And why had only this image resisted the erasure he seemed to impose on everything he remembered about his life? He came back with the album in his hands and kept the photo with him. I needed to understand. No one had ever heard Jakob talk about family, not even a wife, nor children. Just that dense silence that he carried as if it were his own coat. That night, she stayed awake longer than usual, looking at the photo in the dim light of the staff room lamp, trying to imagine who that boy was. What would have happened? Why did Jakob keep this and at the same time hide it? The next day she saw him again at the window, motionless as always. But this time, something in her had changed. I knew that silence had a name. I knew the birthday wasn't the problem. It was a memory of something that could no longer happen. That boy probably never blew out his candles when he was 9 years old. Sofia began to observe the details with a different look. The eyes that didn't move, the way he held the mug with both hands, as if he needed something firm to keep him there. He wasn't just avoiding feeling, he was keeping someone inside his body, as if letting go would kill him again. If you had found this photo, what would you do? Leave it in the comments. What do you think happened to Lucas? Perhaps what Jakob couldn't destroy is precisely what can save him now. Sofia couldn't get the image of that boy out of her head. Lucas's smile, frozen in time, accompanied her even when she tried to distract herself with simple tasks. Between changing the sheets and distributing the medications, she found herself returning to the same question. Why would Jakob keep a photo he clearly couldn't bear to remember? There was something there that went beyond the common silence of many elderly people. It was a type of pain that seemed still raw, even after so many winters. Determined to understand, Sofia went to the asylum's small archive. With the head nurse's discreet permission, he began rummaging through old records, forgotten files, and papers with edges yellowed with age. Jakob's file was there, incomplete as she had already imagined. But it was enough to cross data, dates, and an old police report filed in a blue-gray folder for everything to make sense. The name Lucas reappeared, a car accident, an 8-year-old boy, and a date that coincided exactly with Jakob's birthday. The same afternoon he turned 50, he had lost his son. Not just one child, and the only one, which explained every gesture, every refusal, every denial of the following years. For him, there was nothing left to celebrate. That date no longer marked life. He was absent. Sofia read the report once, then again, as if each line needed to be absorbed with the delicacy that the truth demands. This wasn't just a tragic past, it was the frame of Jakob's gift. A man who, since then, had lived as if every memory was a threat. For him, blowing out a candle was like extinguishing again that little life that destiny had already taken once. She closed the folder carefully, as if returning a secret to its place. She walked back through the halls with slower steps, her heart heavier, but also closer to him. Now she understood why there were no hugs, why the flowers didn't stay in the vases, why the dates were crossed out in silence. That night, Sofia didn't leave a cake or a candle. Instead, he wrote in a small note, "Some dates don't call for a party. They ask for peace," and he left it next to Jakob's armchair, without waiting for a response. When he returned the next morning, the note had been taken. Nothing else was in place, except the cup, with some still warm tea in it. Because for him, celebrating meant remembering. And remembering, it hurt too much. If you felt the silent weight of this story, leave a like right now. Each sensitive gesture is a way of touching lives that time has tried to freeze, but still wait to be reached. On the morning when everyone expected silence, Sofia left her room early. He didn't prepare decorations, order a cake, or invite the other residents to sing. The cafeteria continued with its usual routine, trays sliding across the counters, voices muffled between one cup of tea and another. But outside, in the small garden covered in a delicate layer of snow, something new was about to happen. With her hands covered in thick gloves and her eyes attentive to the cloudy sky, she knelt in front of a forgotten flower bed, where the flowers rarely resisted the cold. There, amidst the white that seemed to swallow time, Sofia lit a candle. It wasn't colorful. It didn't shine like the ones at parties. It was small, stable, silent, as if it knew the moment didn't require words. Just presence. She didn't say anything. He just remained there, with his hands clasped in his lap and his gaze fixed on the flame, which danced slowly with the freezing wind. It was neither a tribute nor a provocation. It was a gesture, a space created so that what could not be said could find air. From the top of the second-story window, Jakob watched. First standing, motionless as always, then taking a step back, as if he wanted to escape what he saw. But then something hesitated. He went down. Nobody noticed when he left. No doors made any noise. His footsteps didn't break the silence in the hallway. He just appeared, wearing a dark brown coat, the same one he wore on the days when he allowed himself to cross the common wing. Sofia didn't turn around. He felt his presence by the soft sound of the snow giving way under his weight. He stopped next to her. He looked at the candle, then to the horizon. No words were said. For a few minutes, there was just the sound of breathing, ragged by the cold, the light rustling of dry branches and the timid glow of the flame resisting the wind. It was as if there, among the shadows and suspended gestures, a new type of celebration was being born. Not one of joy, but of respect. A ritual where there was no singing, no clapping, nothing was recorded. It just remained. When Sofia got up, Jakob was still there, with eyes fixed on the candle, but with shoulders less tense. As if, for the first time in many years, someone had turned on a light that he didn't need to turn off. Because some birthdays don't call for a party. They ask for space to breathe what still hurts. And if you believe that silence can also heal, leave a like. Stories like this are not written with words, but with the courage to remain when time wants to erase everything. In the soft gloom of the asylum's library, where the filtered lights seemed to respect the memory of objects, Jakob walked slowly. The steps were unhurried, but they carried a different weight, not of pain as before, but of something finally finding form. His trembling hands rested on the side of the bookshelf as if that gesture was more than physical. It was a return, a step towards what he had hidden for so long. There, on the third shelf, among hardcover books and loose papers that smelled of oblivion, rested the album, the same one he had tried to erase one day. Sofia wasn't around. Nobody accompanied him, but he knew he didn't need to run away from it anymore. With his fingertips, he pulled the volume, blew off the light dust that had accumulated on the worn leather and opened it with the slowness of someone who no longer fears what is to come. The photo was there, out of place, still folded but intact. Jakob took it, smoothed it gently, and this time, he didn't look away. He stared at Lucas's smile for a long moment, as if he was, finally, allowing the memory not to hurt alone. Carefully, he slid the image back into the space between the pages, where it always belonged. Didn't hide it, it didn't tear. He just closed the album, slowly, as if closing not a chapter but a resistance. On that freezing afternoon, Jakob did not celebrate the past, but he let the present sink in for the first time. There was no cake, no candles, just a photograph put back in time, and a man who finally allowed himself to remember, without destroying himself inside. If this story touched something for you, comment below. Leave your like so that more people can find narratives that speak without shouting. And subscribe to the channel Frozen Chronicles, because some dates freeze time, but others help to thaw the heart.